Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining the first North Central Washington Young Voters Candidate Forum. We are very excited to have Keith and Adrianne with us today, the two candidates for 12th District State Representative. We have 3 youth moderators who will be asking questions submitted by youth from our district during the event. We'll also be taking questions during the event. And if you submit a question, you'll be entered to win a prize with goodies from Whistlepunk Ice Cream, Whiskey Jack Designs, Wenatchee Ware, and Argonaut Espresso Bar. You can submit questions as comments on the Facebook or YouTube Live throughout the event. And we're not going to be able to get to every question that's asked, but if you add your email address to your question, we will give them to the candidates and you'll have the chance to get those answers directly from them. I'm going to start by introducing the 3 youth moderators who will be helping us throughout the event. The first is Juan Mendoza Tovar, age 24. Born in the Wenatchee Valley, Juan Mendoza Tovar has deep roots in the North Central Washington. After graduating from Western Washington University, Juan moved back to the Valley, where he held various positions before landing his current role as a community outreach specialist for Community Health Plan of Washington. While at Western, Juan majored in public relations and minored in queer studies. Thank you for joining us, Juan. Next, we have Emma Skilstad, age 19. A recent graduate of Cascade High School, Emma Skilstad is thrilled to be part of this event. Her passions include, but are not limited to, history, writing, the arts, climate action, and human rights. She will be attending Western Washington University in the fall. Thanks for joining us, Emma. And last, we have Teresa. Teresa is a community organizer and co-founder of Parque Padrinos, a grassroots community group that leads park advocacy, relationship building, and culturally relevant outdoor experiences in South Wenatchee, Washington. Teresa is currently completing an accounting degree at Central Washington University. The daughter of Mexican immigrants, Teresa's parents instilled in her the importance of civic engagement and public service, and she served as an intern and in a variety of leadership roles at organizations in her community. Thank you for joining us, Teresa. Now we're going to have brief introductions from each candidate. So we'll start with Keith.
Well, thank you for doing this forum. It's a great opportunity to share with others about our thoughts. My background is I was born in Leavenworth, grew up here in Dryden, where I still live. I've lived here with my wife, and we have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. My background in education was I went to school here in Shasta and Dryden, Wenatchee Valley, and graduated from Seattle Pacific, and then I taught school in Moses Lake. I've served on the Shasta and Dryden School Board. I've been a Chelan County Commissioner for 4 terms, and I just recently completing my first term as a state representative.
Thank you. Now, Adrianne, could you give your brief introduction?
Sure. Hi. Thanks, Charlotte, Emmett, Juan, Teresa. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all being here and putting this on for us. How fun. Yeah, I'm Adrianne Moore. I'm running for state representative. And my family's been in Eastern Washington for 5 generations. We had a farm outside of Lake Roosevelt and was born not far from that farm, but actually moved around the state. My parents are ministers, so we moved with the church around the state. I'm also a mom of 2. I had my first daughter when I was 20, my first year of college, and learned the hard way what it took to be a young mom and a college student. And I worked full time. And when we moved back to Eastern Washington, to Central Washington, I became the first staff member at a nonprofit. And I've spent most of my adult life working with families to help them build a better life for themselves, partnering with schools and juvenile detention and police and EMS and healthcare to close the gaps in our dangerous rural healthcare and social service system. So I've been doing that for many, many years, and I am super excited to be looking at what our vision for North Central Washington could be with diverse leadership.
Thank you so much to both of our candidates. And now we're going to move into our first section with Juan as the mediator.
Hello. So I'm just going to remind you, you'll have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond to each of these questions. The first 2 questions, I'll alternate, one with Keith and one with Adrianne. They're pretty straightforward questions. After that, you'll each get a response. So we'll go ahead and start. The first question is, what area does the 12th district cover? And I'd like to send that one over to Keith.
Well, it's one of the largest districts in the state. It covers all of Chelan and Douglas County, parts of Okanogan and Grant County. So we go clear to the Canadian border. It's a As I said, it's a very large and diverse state, and yet I would say probably the biggest industries in the district are tourism and agriculture, but small business is really what drives the district. But geographically, it covers a lot of ground to get the 140,000 residents that it needs to have.
Great, thank you. And then Adrianne, the question for you is, when do I have to register to vote by, and how do I register to vote?
Oh, that's a great question. It's really easy to register to vote. Mostly we register when we sign up to get our driver's license. So we have very clear and easy ways to register to vote in Washington State. If you didn't do it when you signed up for your driver's license or don't have your driver's license, it's really easy to do so online. So I think the last day to register to vote is actually very close to the deadline. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's a week or two before November 3rd, which is when we all have to have our ballots back in the mail for the general election.
Great, thank you. So these are the questions that I'll have both of you respond to. We'll start with Adrianne first. And the question is, what effect does the state legislator have on our local community?
Yeah, one of the biggest reasons I think we have low young folks turning out is because it's really complicated to look at what government does and what each representative does. So at a state level, we have 2 state representatives, so Representative Goehner and then Representative Mike Steele are currently in office. And then we have 1 senator, Senator Brad Hawkins. And these are the positions that oversee our state level legislature. So the state level legislator has 2 jobs. 1, they make new laws or they change existing laws. And second, they oversee the budget for the state. So to make that real for folks, I often talk about a couple of examples. So in Washington State, we fund schools at a state level. We decide how much money is going to go to school districts, how it gets divided up. And one of the things that we know is that the way it's currently divided up doesn't put rural school districts ahead. It's actually very challenging for rural school districts to balance their books because of the way the funding formula works out for rural school districts. So one of the top reasons that I decided to run was things like schools and ensuring that we had a voice at the table that was able to advocate for our school district and change the way that we were funded. Another example would be healthcare. So we run our own Medicaid program. And that just, we decide who gets healthcare if you are underinsured or uninsured in Washington State. Our program, our state level program, will cover you or not, depending on what our policy says. So those are 2 examples.
Thank you, Adrianne. And then Keith, the same question for you. What effect does the state legislator have on our local community?
Well, the state legislator can have a lot of impact on what happens locally. Although I'm not on the ag committee, because I am in agriculture, it gives me an opportunity to bring the voice of the growers to the table. The things that I am involved in, though, on transportation. Transportation is huge for the 12th district. We need to get our crops and the produce to market, so we need to have good roads, particularly some areas of this district, and it is up the Met-How where it's a real concern, where we have crumbling infrastructure, and that specifically is in bridges. So as a legislator, I have been lobbying to get those on a much higher priority. And as a legislator that's on the transportation committee, it does give me an opportunity to actually put us in the mix as far as having those discussions. So is it much of an advocate as you can be is really how effective you can be as a legislator. So even if you're not on the committees that deal with that specific issue, you can, by building relationships with the other legislators and across the aisle, you get an opportunity to make sure that they understand what the needs of your district are. In the state of Washington, we've been pretty much ruled by one party for about roughly for 30 years. And so, it's really important for those people who are more urban mindset, for them to understand what rural Washington's needs are. And that's really been one of the things that I've been most concerned about, is making sure that the voice of the 12th is really heard in the legislature.
Thank you so much, Keith. This next question will be for you as well. And then we'll go over Adrianne. What difference can young people make in the upcoming election? Well,
the difference young people can make is obviously by being involved. But, to me, I've always felt I was, always involved in politics from the time I was in, school and college, and then got involved with, party politics and got involved in my community. And, as I mentioned, served. But what really happens with young people is they have an opportunity to become educated about some of the nuances of how society works. And it's really important for them to be able to give some input from a little different perspective, because sometimes, you can, lose your perspective when you get outside of the age group, maybe the demographic that you're in. So that's why it's really important to be continually engaging with constituents across the age spectrum. So, I think if young people are really interested in affecting change, number one, you need to vote. But number two, you need to be educated so that you're making good decisions, because the decisions you're making today are going to affect you in the future and in generations to come. So, there's great opportunity, because, young people, as well as any other voter, you do have an opportunity to make a difference in the policies that we embrace as a state.
Great, thank you. And Adrianne, the same question for you. What difference can young people make in the upcoming election?
Yeah, young people are fired up right now. And I would actually say that I've never seen young people so engaged in democracy as I have right now in this last 6 months, in this last year. So I would say, do what you're doing. You're making your voices heard. You are showing up where it matters most right now. And you are pressuring the systems like the one that I'm running for and that Representative Goehner represents to make the kinds of changes that really reflect your values. And I think that's what you can do. I've heard from young people across the district that they're afraid for their future. They're afraid to go to college because they won't be able to afford the loans that they're going to take out, that they'll have to pay for the rest of their lives. They can't move back to this community because they can't afford housing and they can't get a good job. Those are real things, and those are the kinds of things that a state legislator should and could have an impact on. And every time you make your voices heard, doing what you're doing tonight is the kind of thing that young people need and should be doing in order to change their own future. So I am super excited about what young people are doing right now. And I echo what Representative Goehner said. It's about voting, it's about getting your voices heard, and it's about engaging across the spectrum with, from Black Lives Matter and farm workers to making sure that you're showing up across the aisle and across divides right now to have those hard conversations. Because this isn't about left versus right. And in our region, it's really not. It's not about conservative or progressives or Democrats or Republicans. It's about all of us working together to make the kind of changes that we want to make right now for our future. So I think you guys are rocking it.
Thank you. And then this is my final question before I kick it over to Emma. The question, we'll start off with Adrianne and then we'll go over to Keith. The question is, in what specific ways will you make yourself accountable and accessible to youth in our district? Adrianne?
Great question. I think one of the things that I have been really excited about with our representatives is they answer the phone when you call. So I just want to say that I am proud of our representatives for doing that, including Representative Goehner. I've called him a number of times and he's answered the phone himself or gotten back. So I think we do a good job of being accessible as representatives. And I think it's actually about going one step further in addition and making sure that you're reporting back in a continual conversation with young people. And that takes showing up to where young people are. It takes engaging in the issues that are important to young people. And it takes, really being willing and able to put yourself out there and back up what you're saying with real policy on the ground, real advocacy in Olympia, and being a leader here in this community. I think one example I've really seen is, we're struggling right now. Our region is struggling in North Central Washington. We can't reopen schools. Our businesses are shutting down, and our people are afraid and divided. And I think a state representative could be someone who shows up in this moment and offers real leadership. And I think that that's what our youth have been calling for a long time. They want to go back to school. They want to go back to their jobs. So I think it's about showing up in the issues that really matter, both in Olympia and here in our own district.
Thank you. And Keith, the same question for you. In what specific ways will you make yourself accountable and accessible to youth in our district?
Well, I think, what I've done is to be accessible. That's one of the things that's always been a concern of mine as an elected official, is to be sure that no matter who is contacting us, we're doing our best to get back to them and make sure that you have a good understanding of where they're coming from. One of the challenges of being a representative is the volume of requests that you get. I mean, it's literally physically impossible to get back to everyone, but it's really important for us to make sure that we're connecting with the people who are expressing, concerns, and that we, as you say, make yourself accessible. I know that I've talked with, as far as like educators, students. I mean, and it's hard to make sure that you cover the whole district because, as I said, just the sheer geographic area that you have to cover. But I've made a real, I've been very intentional in trying to reach out to every segment of our district. But having said that, I mean, you also have to keep in mind the number of things that we are tasked with. Young people are a segment, and yes, that's very important. The older people are a segment, and that's important. And then when you start putting all these things together, that's what makes good representation, is being able to blend all the issues, make sure that everyone is being heard, but also approaching it in a way where you can actually affect change by providing some good solutions.
Awesome, thank you both. And then now Emma will be asking you some questions on political issues.
Hi, so I'll be asking you questions submitted from people in the district, primarily young people. You will each have 90 seconds to answer. We'll be starting with Keith for this first question. This question is coming from Kenzie Converse, age 27. She's from Leavenworth, Washington. I'm a bartender. I've worked in the service industry for a decade and a half, most of my experience in Leavenworth, Washington. During the COVID crisis, as you know, the restaurant industry got hit the hardest. Many small business owners struggled and continue to struggle as they work around the new safety regulations, making their businesses work to their best ability despite the limitations. Leavenworth thrives on the operation of these small businesses. With COVID still overhanging and slow season upon us, how will you plan on providing financial aid or support in light of the event of a second shutdown or continued operational limitations for small businesses? Your time begins now.
Well, that's a really, I understand the challenges that are there. And one of the things that we've been trying to do since the shutdown was to have a systematic approach to opening up businesses and making sure that they're done in a safe and secure manner. The unfortunate thing is that some of these businesses, lend themselves to being really challenged as far as being able to do it safely. And one of the things, with if she's a bartender, I mean, in that close type of interaction, it is a challenge. And so those people haven't been able to be open. But I do believe that if the government is going to come in and cause people to not be able to be employed, not be able to, as an employer, even have your business, that we should be in a position where we're providing financial assistance. It's been a real challenge, from the state level, just the actual dollars. I know that the federal government stepped in and made it, really pretty. When I say pretty good, I mean it backfilled the loss. But that, I'm sure that people would much rather be working. We'd much rather not be having this. But I think that we're going to have to continue to provide some support for people as much as we can. Now, having said that, the state as a whole, we're going to be about $9 billion short too. So we're going to be, just providing basic services is going to be a real challenge. But I do think that we need to recognize the needs that people have by not being able to work.
All right, Adrianne, you may start.
Thanks. I have spent so much time talking to businesses across this district, and it is clear that people want to reopen. We can't survive as businesses. We can't survive as a community. Half of our businesses, half of our people are employed by small businesses. Small businesses are the lifeblood of North Central Washington. And there's only one way for us to reopen schools and reopen businesses, and that's to overcome COVID. And we have had an incredible lack, a vacuum of leadership around getting over COVID-19 in our district. And it is a shame that we should be addressing right now, because our businesses they need us. I talked to a business in Leavenworth actually who said, look, if my refrigerator is 2 degrees above temperature, the health department will come out, they will give me a citation, and they'll check back on me in 2 weeks. No one has come and checked to see that I am complying with regulations with regards to COVID-19. And that pits me against my neighbor, against the business next door. And that's why we are becoming so divided as a community, because nobody is given the leadership or the clear regulations or the clear instructions of how we as a community overcome COVID-19. I think that this is something that we need to do as a community. We need to lift up our leaders. We need to ask our leaders to step up and step in. It does not give me any joy to say that Keith has actually lifted up Restore Washington, which is a fight against the regulations that are going to help us overcome COVID-19. And that's not okay right now. We need to be in this together. We cannot be divided any longer.
And I'm going to have to stop you right there. All right, our next question, Adrianne, you will begin, and then we'll move over to Keith. This question is from Lizbeth, age 22, from East Wenatchee. With the census count happening and dependent on the count/population growth it documents, we know there's a possibility of redistricting happening in our state. This is really important to some of us because it would also be an opportunity for the Colville tribe to be reunited. What are your thoughts on this possible redistricting effort, and is it something of importance to you? Is it important to you to push for a majority-minority district in your area? Your time begins now.
Oh, so sorry. Can you repeat the beginning? I think it cut out for me. I was waiting for it.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Not at all.
With the census count happening and dependent on the count/population growth it documents, we know there's a possibility of redistricting happening in our state. This is really important to some of us because it would also be an opportunity for the Colville tribe to be reunited. What are your thoughts on this possible effort, and is it something of importance to you? Is it important to you to push for a majority-minority district in your area? Your time begins now.
Thanks, Emma. I appreciate that. One of the issues I've spoken with the Colville folks about is this very issue that I think the way districts are cut in Washington state has divided tribes and divided their voting capacity, their voting block. And it's a real issue for many of the people in our district. And I absolutely would support the idea of redistricting along tribal lands, along our reservation lands. I think that's the right thing to do. I also think that Washington state will be redrawn up. It's what happens after a census. It's part of the purpose of a census. And I think we have to do it in a fair and equitable way that allows people's voices to be heard across this district. So I think the idea that districts can be drawn up in a way that benefits one party or another is wrong across the board, whether or not it happens for a Democrat or happens for a Republican preference. But I do think it's important that people get to be represented together and that their communities are within one district as much as possible in Washington state.
Mm-hmm. All right. Keith, same question?
Well, I think that it would be good for the Colvilles to be, in the same district and to be together. And I also think that, when you look at like Okanogan County, when you're split, and even Grant County, you have these little, fractions of the county that are split off, and it really is better for, homogeneous groups to actually be together and have that representation. So I certainly would support that. But it is something that the Redistricting Commission will have to consider, and hopefully, they do that in a way that it does unite, what I would consider to be logical divisions, as opposed to splitting, little segments of a community, or in the case of the tribes, splitting them off, because there is a challenge, because they do have issues. And as a legislator, I've been, advocating for, some things for them, but when some of the things are in another district, it makes it more difficult to communicate to make sure that everyone is united in that being a priority. Whereas if the Colvilles were represented by just one legislative delegation, it would give more strength to conveying that message. So I think it would be good to have them together.
All right. Our next question, Keith, you will be starting. This comes from Cole, age 23, from Wenatchee. 17% of renters in Washington missed their July housing payment. How will you make sure that no one will be going homeless due to the pandemic and recession? What is your position on a temporary or permanent universal basic income to fuel economic growth and limit poverty? Your time begins now.
Well, it's very unfortunate, again, that people have been literally put in a position where they haven't been able to be employed, because most of these people have had jobs. And, as I mentioned earlier, the government basically has shut them down. So, hopefully there are ways that we can help people meet their obligations. But one of the things that has been a real issue in the last 2 years in the legislature is that landlord-tenant relationship, where there has been more legislation that has made it so that the landlords, the property owners, are not even getting compensated to the degree that they should. So I mean, it's a matter of trying to reach the balance between what is a reasonable rent to be charged, and of course, if you engage in that contract to rent, I mean that's a willing relationship. As it relates to a permanent or an income, to me, the beauty of our society has been where people have been able to make choices and pursue businesses or occupations through their education, or just through training. I mean, I think, to me, that's what really gives people a sense of fulfillment in who they are and in their abilities that they've been given. So, I really would not be in support of a fixed income for people.
All right. Adrianne, your time begins now.
First, I just want to be so clear that the government didn't shut us down. COVID-19 did. And until we can radically reduce COVID-19 cases, which takes leadership, we won't be able to reopen businesses and people won't be able to pay their bills again. So I just want to be so clear about what our goal is and how we can stop being divided around the issue is to really focus on the problem, which is COVID-19. But this problem that you're talking about, Emma, the ability to afford a house, to be able to pay your rent or your mortgage, has existed long before COVID-19. So I'll say two things. One is my opponent, Representative Goehner, has long advocated for reducing the budget in Washington State. And I'll say he often will talk about how the budget has continued to grow over the years. And one of the things that is missing in that statement is that the budget has grown, but not as fast as we have. So it would be like telling a family of 4 that suddenly we're going to give you 2 more kids, but you have to live on the same income. That's what we've done with the budget in Washington State. Yes, it's grown over the past 20 years, but it's not grown as fast as our population has. And if we want to have things like schools and healthcare and housing, we are going to have to make sure that we have a robust enough budget to cover that. I also think, and I think my opponent and I would agree on this, we have to be more efficient in how we spend money. The way we spend money as a state is not always the best possible way to spend money in order to lift people up and get people on their feet and able to work and pay the bills that they want to and need to pay. So I think that what we have to do is absolutely find new revenue sources, and we have to support the people across this district in getting the basic needs met.
All right. Our next question, Adrianne, you will be starting, and then we'll move to Keith. This question is from Wallace, age 22, from Wenatchee. The state is projected to spend about $83 billion over the next 3 fiscal years to maintain services at current levels. Based on a new revenue forecast, the state is now projected to have a $6.6 billion shortfall over the next 3 years due to the COVID-related economic downturn. The governor recently opted to spend $43 million in relief funds to support undocumented workers with direct forms of stimulus at the opportunity cost of millions in short-term relief for overburdened industries, demonstrating an expansion on unprotected services rather than a reduction of them. My question is this: how can the state continue to function at its current operation? Are we unwilling to make cuts? And what services will need to be redesigned or removed to avoid total fallout? Adrianne?
Right now, we're actually projected to have a $9 billion deficit, so even bigger deficit than what he named in that question, and that's real and scary. And we need somebody at the decision-making table in Olympia. So the first thing I'll say is, as Representative Goehner said earlier, this is a Republican control, this is a Democratic controlled legislature. You wish it was.
Yes, I do.
Controlled legislature, which means that right now our representatives are sitting on the bench and they're not going to be part of those discussions. And that's a loss for all of us across the aisle. We need somebody in the game, in Olympia, shooting baskets for us. We need someone who can be at that decision-making table in Olympia. And I know that that sounds like a really challenging thing to do in our district right now, and it's also just what we need. We have Republican representation, and we need somebody at that Democratic decision-making table. The second thing I'll say is that we're absolutely going to have to find new revenue sources in order to cover the gap. And that's something that's going to make hard choices. But I'll tell you, recently, Bill Gates said, I should be taxed more. I don't pay my fair share. The folks at the bottom are paying far more in taxes in Washington state than the folks at the top. On average, those at the bottom pay about 17% of their income in taxes, while those at the top pay 1 to 2% of their income in taxes. That's not equitable, that's not fair, and that's not how we're going to get people back on their feet. We can't afford to starve our communities in the midst of a pandemic.
All right. Keith?
Well, there was a lot in that question, but I would say that the budget at the state level has grown considerably faster than the people have in the state. So since 2012, it's been about 70% increase. We're up to $54 billion for 2 years for the biennium. If people want to make contributions, I would welcome Bill Gates to go ahead and write a check for the state. But I think we have to keep in mind who has been writing these budgets, who has put us in this position where we haven't been able to, we've been able to generate a lot of revenue because we've had some great businesses that have come to the state, and they have been doing that. But the tax structure has been, as I mentioned earlier, has been controlled by one party. So I do think that if there were more people that would be more willing to look at a different tax structure, that our side of the aisle would certainly be willing to look at that. It's interesting though that when we spend every dollar that we generate, that where we've had excess revenues come in, plus we've added on more taxes, and now we haven't been funding the things that I believe we should be funding, and that's taking care of the people. With some of the Medicaid reimbursements, the schools need to be cared for. I mean, look, we've got some very basic services that the state should be addressing, which we haven't been able to do.
All right. This will be our last question based on timing. We'll start with Keith and then go to Adrianne. This question is coming from Zach, age 28, from Wenatchee. I am extremely concerned about corporate donations to political candidates and its overall impact on our democracy. In your views, what are the precise steps to get corporate money out of our political system entirely so that we can guarantee our elected representatives are representing the people and not corporate interests? Keith, your time begins now.
Well, okay, I know that it'll be mentioned that I had contributions from PACs and others, that have contributed to the campaign. But I will say that when you look at where that money has come from, whether it's the NFIB, which is small business, whether it's the Potato Commission, whether it's the Tree Fruit Commission, these are interests that are in our district. And the reason these people, have supported me is because they see that I'm representing this district. They see how important it is. And to me, as was mentioned earlier, the small business people in the 12th district, they're the ones that drive this district. They contribute to their communities. They're the ones that are, reinvesting in the schools. They're the ones that we need to make sure that we can have a good, strong economy. The tourism industry has been great. I mean, whether it's the Met House, whether it's Leavenworth, whether it's Chelan, wherever it is, Wenatchee. But those are, things that are seasonal, and we need to, embrace the things that we've done well with. But when you look at the 12th district, I think agriculture needs to be supported, and you don't see the corporations that I'm not sure exactly who they're specifically relating to, but those are not the people that are driving representation.
All right. Adrianne?
I will mention that half of Representative Goehner's contributions come from the West Side. For someone who says that he wants to represent East Side interests in Olympia, to be getting much of his financing from West Side corporations, including Chevron and Amazon and Weyerhaeuser, which don't have vested interest in our district. That's the problem. I don't think that we are actually. I think that the people who the power behind this district is the people. And unless we get big money out of politics, we will not be able to have representational democracy. We will not be able to have the kind of elected officials that come from the people. Right now, it is hard to run for election unless you have connection to big money or money in your community. Right now, we have over 450 contributions. Half of them are small donors. And I think that's what it takes to have someone who's from the people, who's going to turn back and look to the people when they have a hard decision to make in Olympia. It's easy to say that we don't let that money, the interest, turn how we make a decision or influence our day-to-day policy in Olympia. But we actually know from all the evidence that that's just not true. So I think this is an incredibly important question. We absolutely need to get big money out of politics. We won't have a democracy, a true democracy, until we do.
All right. Thank you both. I'll be sending you over to Teresa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for being a part of this forum. Now we move forward to the live Q&A portion of this event. And so we want to thank all of the young voters who have taken the time to ask some really thought-provoking questions. We'll go ahead and get started with our first question. And Adrianne, this one will go to you. This question is coming from Alex Romero, age 27, from Wenatchee. His question is, please describe a tangible change that you have made in order to be in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. What examples of legislation that you have supported that are directly accountable to the undocumented people in your district? So there's two questions there for you.
That's great. Hi, Alex. I see you. Thanks for your question. First, I'll talk about fire recovery, and then I will talk about healthcare. So the first one, when we had 2014-15, we had devastating fires in Okanogan County, and across party lines, I helped stand up the fire recovery efforts. I worked with people who were on both sides of the aisle to stand up one of the most successful recoveries that FEMA had seen. We made sure that every person up every creek had access to the resources they needed to recover. And we did that by partnering across lines. But we also did that by bringing in something that was unique to recovery. FEMA had not done this before, which is we were really clear that if we were going to do this work, if I was going to be involved in this work, we were going to make sure that everybody had access to the resources to recover. And that didn't matter if they were a single mom living in a trailer without electricity. We wanted to make sure that she had access to the same amount of resources as someone whose $500,000 home burnt down. In most fire recovery efforts, you get back what you lost, but we made sure that people were better off afterwards. And I think it's those sort of equity initiatives that really reflect where I come from and what I think is important, which is making sure that people are not just back to where they come from, but that everybody has a fair chance at getting a leg up. Everybody has a fair chance at a good future. The second one, do I have 10 seconds?
10 seconds.
Okay, the second one is around healthcare. I worked at a statewide level to change policy to make sure that everybody had access to the same level of healthcare, and we've been incredibly effective at doing so.
And time's up. Thank you. Keith, the same questions go to you.
I believe the questions had to do with Black Lives Matter and the documented workers. Is that correct?
Yes. What are the examples of legislations that you have supported that are directly accountable to the undocumented people in your district? And that first one was the tangible changes that you've made in order to stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement.
Well, there are a lot of things that I would like to talk about where I've worked to as a county commissioner and also, my community involvement. I mean, that our community is an ag community. And I know as an orchardist that I've been, I recognize that my success has been predicated by the people that have been willing to work for us. And we've developed, great relationships with those who have. Personally, I've been involved in a number of individuals who have worked toward getting their citizenship. And so, I mean, that was, even predated my involvement at the, elected level, because I really do feel like when people are, they have a desire to better themselves, they're willing to, they're working hard. I mean, I want to do what I can to help people. So, I mean, that's really has been what has motivated me to reach out and to, provide the assistance that I can, whether it be writing letters or even contributing, dollars to help them through the process. As it relates to the Black Lives Matter, I think one of the big things that we need to really take a good hard look at is making sure that we're identifying the issues that need to be addressed. And, sometimes I think, we do get movements that, unfortunately, there are those that kind of co-opt the movement. They expand it into areas that really take away from the real message that needs to be, focused on. So if it really is about the Black Lives Matter, we're talking about, I'm sorry, time's up. I missed your hand.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yes, no worries. This time just goes by so quickly. The next question comes from Stella Johnson, age 18, from Leavenworth. And Keith, this question will go to you first. It's, what do you think the 12th district needs to improve on with sustainability? And how do you see yourself playing a role in that improvement?
Well, one of the big issues that we have in the 12th district is forest health. And I would say to, sustain the environment that we have. I mean, the forest, a healthy forest provides, great environmental benefits. It can provide great economic benefits. And, it's a win-win-win. I mean, from the standpoint of, putting people to work, having a healthier forest, and then a cleaner environment. That's one element of the sustainability. The other thing, though, some other things that we can be doing is providing a better business environment. We are going to be challenged. There are so many people who are out. Their businesses have been closed because they haven't been able to, for whatever, whether it's COVID or whether it's the government. The reality is their businesses are shuttered. And I know that I've talked to people who are not going to be, they're not planning to reopen their businesses. So, I mean, from sustaining a good, strong economic base, we have to make sure that we're dealing with the things that we're doing well. And that's, the ag and tourism and, the things that have been successful, continue to embrace that, but also create opportunities for other people, for entrepreneurs to open new businesses. And oftentimes the biggest impediment to people opening a business are regulations. So make sure that what we have on the books really do make sense and they really do provide for a better business environment.
Thank you. Adrianne, the same question goes to you.
I think the question is about environmental sustainability. So I'm going to answer it that way, and I could be wrong. When the 2014-15 fires hit, I'll tell you who was most affected. It's working people and families, it's young people, and it's people who have health issues. When we have a climate that is warming, when we have catastrophic wildfires year after year, when we have these issues that are affected, that are being, just on the backs of young people and on the backs of working people and families that are related to climate change and aren't doing anything about it from our district, that's a problem. And, I've spoken with Representative Goehner before about this, and, he's denied that climate change is a real thing in our district. And there will be a response to climate change in Washington State. There will be. And unless we're at the table, unless we have someone who actually says that this exists and that this is a problem for working people and families, it's a problem for young people, it's a problem for people with health issues, we are not going to be at the forefront of having that issue be addressed for our district. I helped change the legislation and policy around fire prevention and recovery so that our forests are better protected. I've done the work of advocating for our district around environmental issues before, and I'll absolutely be at the forefront of continuing to do it. Our district is a hotbed, and it's up in fire right now, and we need to be addressing that each and every day in the legislature.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question comes from Jania, age 32, from Kashmir. And this question will go to you, Adrianne, first. And the question is, in your experience, what are the challenges faced by members of historically underrepresented groups in the workplace, especially during the pandemic? What strategies will you use to address these challenges?
I grew up working class. I've spent my whole life working in one way or another. I'm a mom of two, and I've spent my adult life working in social services. I started out working in the domestic violence field. I was a night manager while I was in college and a mom, making sure that women and children had the opportunity to get back on their feet after experiencing domestic violence. And for the last 12 years, I've been a director at a social service organization, helping to ensure that everybody, regardless of where they come from or what they look like or what they do for a living, had the opportunity to support their families. And I think that's a value shared across our district. If you work hard, you should be able to make it. You should be able to pay your mortgage. You should be able to get health care. You should be able to send your kids to a school that educates them. And kids and families in our district are struggling. This is not happening. So I'm proud to be endorsed by the grocers. I'm proud to be endorsed by teachers. I'm proud to be endorsed by the folks who are actually on the front lines right now doing the work. These are the essential workers. I'm endorsed by the Democratic Latino Caucus because that's my background, that's who I am, and that's who I'm going to fight for when I'm in legislature.
Thank you. Keith, the same question goes to you.
You know, my background is, my grandpa was an immigrant. He came over and you know, he just had a great opportunity. You know, he felt like there was a great opportunity to come to America. And, you know, eventually they settled in Washington. And as a kid, you know, that's kind of where we were. We were just, you know, the working class people, where my dad was a, you know, gas truck driver. And, you know, I had an opportunity to, you know, to go to college and to become a teacher and to, you know, see, live a little bit different life, and ended up being, you know, working in the orchard. And that's the way I grew up. And so where I'm coming from is feeling like, you know, everybody should have an equal voice. It doesn't matter what strata of society you're in. And that's why, for me, recognizing my roots, I'm always trying to find, you know, how do people feel no matter where they're at. I mean, they may not be in my immediate circle, but I'm going to reach outside of that to try and make sure that people's voices are heard, because it's so easy for people to get lost because they don't feel like they have a voice. And that's really what, you know, my goal is to make sure that everyone has a voice, it's heard, and we respond to it.
Thank you both for your answers. Our next question goes to Keith first. It's from Stella Johnson. No, we're going to move forward here. This is a question from Owen, age 21, from Leavenworth. The question is, currently there are 794,000 uninsured people in Washington State, a 52% increase since March. A recent study from the University of Massachusetts found that a single-payer healthcare system will save the U.S. $5.1 trillion over a decade. Knowing this, how are you pushing for a single payer at a state and national level so that we can catch up to the rest of the developed world? And the question goes to you, Keith.
Well, I guess, you know, that is a study. I haven't seen the study, so I can't, you know, speak to that study. I know that I've certainly read enough other studies too that show, you know, the expense of that single payer system. But even more critical is the level of care. And that's what I'm really am concerned about, is that we do maintain some of the best healthcare facilities in the world, and people come to the U.S. to get good treatment. I have relatives from Canada, which is a single payer system, that actually schedule their surgeries in the U.S. and they pay for it themselves. So I think that there are some other issues that need to be looked at in that process. But I also know that here in the state of Washington, we don't have the freedom with the insurance market for competitive insurance policies to be lowering costs by competition. But I do feel like the most critical thing for us is to ensure that we maintain the facilities that we have. And I know that the biggest provider of services in our area here is Confluence Health, and I know how difficult it is and how tight their margins are. And I don't believe, and if you talk to those people there, I don't think that they would see that would be the answer to their financial issues and services.
Thank you. Adrianne, the question goes to you.
I've worked in healthcare for a long time. I currently oversee a statewide healthcare initiative, a department for a healthcare initiative. I, at my former nonprofit, helped sign up hundreds and hundreds of folks for health insurance, and met with folks each and every day who didn't have access to the health insurance they needed to treat their cancer or their diabetes or to get their kids mental health care. This is a disaster. It's a shame, and our district is suffering. I talked to those administrators across our district, at healthcare agencies across our district many times. I've talked to medical providers, and what they say is that they're afraid that we're going to have to build another wing on the hospital to treat diabetes patients because we don't have preventative care. It's true we cannot offer universal health care at a state level with our current revenue. We can't afford it, but we can absolutely close the gap for middle income earners. We could absolutely provide a public option. We used to provide a public option. It got me through college and my child and partner through college. It is, we have so much work we can do at a state level to ensure that each and every person has access to the healthcare they need. And right now, if you call people across our district, you will hear from them that this is their number one issue. They do not have access to the healthcare they need. So I agree, quality is an issue, but what good is the quality if the majority of the people in our district can't access preventative healthcare, can't access that surgery, can't get cancer treatment when they need it?
Thank you. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here with us. We've had a number of live questions, and unfortunately, we did not get to all of them. Thank you to the young voters that are streaming this live. Thank you for your active participation. We had some really thought-provoking questions, and all the questions submitted during this event will go to the candidates for them to respond directly if we didn't have enough time to answer it live. So with that, I will take it off to Charlotte to announce some winner giveaways.
Thank you so much, Teresa. We had a lot of questions, and we're excited to announce that the giveaway winner, who won gifts from Whistle Punk Ice Cream, Wenatchee Ware, Argonaut Espresso Bar, and Whiskey Jack Design, is Elizabeth Rivera. Congratulations, Elizabeth. We'll reach out to you for you to collect your prize. Now we're going to go into closing remarks. So we're going to have Adrianne and Keith both spend 3 minutes giving closing remarks about their candidacy and closing out their answers to the questions that you've asked today. We're going to have Adrianne go first, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Charlotte. I think there's a few things I want to follow up on. One is about having a seat at the table in Olympia. I talked about it a little earlier, but I think that this is a critical point. Right now, we have folks who are on the bench, and we are not able to have the kind of effective leadership, the effective representation that we need because we don't have a seat at the majority table in Olympia. And we can say that this is about Republicans or Democrats, but it's not. It's about making the right choice for our district so that we can get through this economic recession that's going to be here for years. and that we have a voice for North Central Washington, for our young folks, for our older folks, for our working families, for our small businesses, for our orchards, and for our farmers. This is what we're going to need to do, is have a voice at the decision-making table in Olympia. I also wanted to talk about having an equal voice. I think Representative Goehner and I agree that that's important, but I think what we don't agree on is that that doesn't happen right now. Earlier, you asked a question about BLM and about farm workers, and I don't think I answered it very well. And here's what I want to say. I want to say that those folks don't have an equal voice at the table in North Central Washington, that we have parts of our community who have long been silenced and long been marginalized, and that's nobody's fault. But it has to change. We need to make sure that everybody, particularly the folks in our district who have long been silenced, have a voice, have a representative who's going to work for them in Olympia. And I think that that's something that I am uniquely poised to do and just excited about. One of the things that I have done in the last couple of months is show up. I've showed up to listen, I've showed up to learn, and I've showed up to stand beside people. I also think that it is not about division in our district. There are people at the top who are actively trying to divide rural neighbors from neighbors so that we're looking the other way while they rig the economy for their own gain. And that means that we have this incredible division at a local level. We turn and we are afraid of our own neighbors. We are afraid that if they get something, we might not. And I think that's a lose-lose equation. And I am sad to say that I have seen our Representative Goehner continue that dialogue around division. We need someone who's going to be willing to bring people together. It's not about farm workers versus farmers. We can support both of those folks at the table. We can make sure that they both have what they need to thrive, because nobody will unless both of those sets of folks do in our community. And when we pit people against each other, we all lose. So I am hoping that you all will vote for me, not just because I have the experience, because I have the personal experience, because I've spent my entire adult life getting ready for this position, but because I will truly be there to represent the people, the working people and families, the small businesses, the orchardists at the table, because I understand the issues. Someone recently told me that a good representative is someone who works harder and knows their people better than anyone else. And that's just who I am and what I've always done. And I hope for your vote. I thank you all for doing this. Charlotte, this is amazing. I'm so proud of all of the young folks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Adrianne. Okay, now Keith, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. And thank you for this forum. And it has been good. I'm glad you've initiated it. You know, when I look at why I even really want to be a representative, it's because I do care about the people. And my public service really, and my voting record really speaks for itself. And I think that, you know, if you want to talk about division or you want to talk about bringing people together, that's been the motivation that I've had all my life, as far as, you know, working, whether it was in the community, in my church, in public service. And I think it, you know, my voting record, you know, once again, you know, people have felt like that I have been someone who has been working and reaching out. And one thing that I have always tried to do is to find people that don't agree with me, to understand where they're coming from, because I know that I don't have all the answers, and to think that, you know, that anyone, you know, has the, you know, the only right way to go. Well, sometimes it is a different perspective that helps you become a better representative of the people. Now, we're not ever always going to all come together in the 12th district, because some people, they're not really that interested in coming to the table. And it is, as a representative, it's my job to try and bring those people there, even if we're not going to ever agree. Well, they need to have their voice heard. And hopefully, you know, we can reach a point where, you know, we can, you know, be productive. We can live together in harmony. And, you know, when you talk about, you know, whether it's employer, employee, farmer, farm worker, we're all in this together. We all create opportunities, and people have an opportunity to take advantage of what you know, someone else has taken the risks for. And it's all about, you know, making our lives better. And it's not just about having more money. It's about having better relationships, better, you know, being more fulfilled in your community. And if you can't, you know, enjoy the company of your neighbor, even if you're not politically aligned, then we need to really look within ourselves and say, you know, what can I do to be a better person, be a catalyst for change? And that's really what has driven me to be a public servant. You know, it isn't as glamorous as people think, but it's a real challenge. It's a lot of work. And that's really something that I still feel like, you know, I want to do. I want to make this world a better place. I want to leave the place better than when I came. And that's really, you know, my objective. You know, when I talked earlier about some of the things about, you know, when you talk about climate change or whatever, we've got some opportunities in the 12th district to make a better place in all facets. And I think that that's really where we need to sit down and be very cognizant of what kinds of change we can affect and work diligently to do that. So, you know, I would certainly appreciate your vote and for the opportunity to continue to serve. And I know that the relationships that I've built, I'm still working on with them, with people. One of the things is the water in the Med House. It may not come to a lot of people's thoughts, you know, is that even something that's important? It's critical to those people. And that's why I'm working hard to try and solve the needs for those people. So thank you again for the opportunity to serve you. And I look forward to, you know, hopefully serving another 2 years.
Thank you so much, Keith. And thank you to Adrianne for participating in this event. We want to encourage everyone to continue reaching out to both Adrianne and Keith with questions during the campaign and after one of them is elected. We also want to let you know that we are organizing the second Young Voters Forum with candidates for the 8th Congressional District, Kim Shire and Jesse Jensen. You can follow our Facebook page for updates on the event, which will be in October. And we also want to thank all of our mediators, Juan, Emma, and Teresa, and to Adrianne and Keith for participating in the event and engaging directly with young voters. Thank you for asking questions and engaging our political representatives. And remember that your vote matters, and it's your choice who will represent us in office.
Thank you.